Sign to continue lease. I've lurked here a long time and never thought of something I could post, but remembered this gem. From about 14 years ago. This starts when my now wife and I decided to move in together and rent a house. We were in our early 20s. It was our first time renting and we had fairly low income, so our options were limited. Luckily, we found a place that was in a less desirable area but had recently had some basic renovations. We signed a lease and life went on. Our first 12 months went by with a rental inspection from the agent every 3 months or so. Never got any feedback, and being new to renting, figured everything was okay. We had a couple items that needed repairing in that time, so I met the landlord and got his details for organizing repairs. He seemed like a decent bloke, probably early 40s, reasonably handy, and did some repairs himself. The first year went by. The lease came to an end. They increased the price and we signed on for another 12 months. Then it happened. About 2 months later, the agent came to inspect along with the landlord's wife. The wife turned her nose up at absolutely everything and made a number of insulting comments about our furniture when she thought I couldn't hear. We got an inspection report after that, gave us a huge list of items to rectify and 2 weeks to do it, or they'd initiate proceedings to evict us. Naturally, after never hearing any feedback from any other inspections, we were shocked. The items were mostly minor nitpicks, with the worst things being to move our cats outdoors, clean the oven, and poison weeds on the path in the backyard. We were fine copping it on the chin and doing what they asked. Except for the cats. Initially, when signing the lease, it said no pets, but we requested and got acceptance for our indoor only cats. It was noted on the lease, but not on the copy I had. I was kicking myself for not having it in writing and knew I had no chance if they wanted to push the point. So I called the landlord rather than talking through the agent. He explained that tenants in the other house they owned had been using it as a drug lab and the agents had never picked up on it. So when they found out, his wife insisted on going along to our inspection. Hence why we got a bad report. I talked it out with him, and although he was very patronizing towards me, he agreed we could keep the cats inside as long as we kept everything clean, and the next reports went fine. So we did as they asked, and they increased the inspections from once every 3 months to once a month, which is the minimum period they're allowed. We had a list of things to fix after every inspection. It made our life hell. We felt like intruders in our own home. We grew to hate living there, and it put a strain on our relationship. Luckily or unluckily, depending on how you look at it, my father passed away around that time. So I ended up with inheritance money from his super fund and the sale of his house. My wife and I used the inheritance as a deposit to buy a house of our own, sorted out a loan agreement, and found a place we liked. Now this is where I finally got my chance to repay them for making us feel like indentured servants that only existed to vacuum carpets and scrub walls in our home. By some miracle of luck, I negotiated the settlement date for our new house to be 1 week before our lease was due to end. This meant that we wouldn't have to break contract and be stuck footing the bill while they found new tenants. Better yet, they sent me a letter saying our lease was due to end and included a new lease agreement with a large jump in rent. The letter said we had to either sign the new lease and send it back to them by a date that was 2 weeks before end of lease, or consider the contract ended, move out by the end of the lease term, and hand over the keys. It said nothing about telling them we didn't want to renew the lease. So I didn't. I didn't want them booking open inspections and intrude further on our lives to show the place to new tenants, and decided they didn't deserve extra notice. The days ticked by. A couple weeks went past and my wife and I were busy getting ready to move. I didn't get contacted by the agent again until my phone rang 1 week after the new paperwork was due. Literally the day before we were moving out. It was the agent, of course. They greeted me nicely and said it was just a reminder that we needed to sign the new lease and get it back to them. I told them, "Oh, we aren't signing it. We bought a house and we're moving out tomorrow." The other end of the line went dead silent for a good few seconds while my face got stuck in a grin. The agent quietly asked why we hadn't told them, and I said the paperwork only said to let them know if we were extending the lease. Nothing about moving out, so I assumed they knew. She said goodbye pretty quickly and the panic in her voice was glorious. She was screwed and knew it. I wish I got to hear more of the fallout, but my wife and I moved out. Cleaned the house over the remaining week and I handed the keys over. They never booked any open inspections in that final week, so the house sat empty for a while, waiting on new tenants, and the landlords missed out on some rent payments. We also checked the listings and saw they advertised it at a lower price than what they were going to gouge us for. As a bonus, a couple days after the lease ended, the agent called me and said our contact stated we had to have the carpets steam cleaned and they were going to take the cost from our bond. I told her we'd had them steam cleaned and she said we didn't. The carpets smelled like garbage. After me telling her again that we had, she demanded a copy of the receipt. I emailed it through and never heard from them again. I didn't mention that there was a cavity under the house and the couple bags of rubbish I chucked under there as we were moving out because the bins were full. I guess the floor wasn't airtight. TLDR. Paperwork says to sign a new lease and return by 2 weeks before end of current lease, otherwise we had to move out. Agent assumed we were extending. We moved out without telling them. They ended up with an empty house and missed out on rent payments. Never in my life have I heard of a landlord coming in every 3 months for an inspection, let alone 1 month. In what country is this allowed? They even opened your oven door? How intrusive. So the agent just assumed that you would agree to a significant and unfavorable change of the terms of the contract? They set themselves up for it. Any reasonable person knows you never assume consent. But then again, you did say they successfully missed a drug lab set up on a property they manage. So I guess we can't have too high expectations. I could see if someone had pets, maybe a quick spot check every 3 months, but that should only require a hot minute, as in no obvious damage from pets and no smells that might be expected if pets were not house trained. Looking at anything else like inside the oven sounds invasive. Glad Op followed the instructions on the lease renewal to the letter back in the day. When my first roommate and I rented our first apartment back in the early 80s. We were pretty trusting, so we cleaned and cleaned that apartment when we moved out, and were very disappointed to see that they still kept a $35 cleaning fee from our deposit. At first they wouldn't tell us what it was for, but I forced the issue more as a learning experience. They called it miscellaneous. I called it B. The second time, we paid her sister, a professional house cleaner, to come in and clean the house. We provided a receipt showing that we had had it done, and the manager actually approved the place before we left. They still removed a cleaning deposit. When we asked why, she said the place was owned by a bunch of lawyers and they did it because they could. Ever since, whenever I move out of a rental, I leave it presentable, but I don't waste my time cleaning. If the landlord is going to pay someone to come in and clean, why am I killing myself? I'd rather spend my energy moving into my new place. My last apartment, about 6 years ago, the landlady said not to bother. She was going to have a deep clean done, and admitted that there was no way I would ever get it as clean as they wanted it. My parents have a rental house in the privately managed, superannuation trust, no idea when inspections are. That's what they pay a real estate agent for. Dad sees the inside for a cursory look around once every 3 months because he is a handyman. Still at 73 and doesn't see the point of paying a fortune to a builder to go run a plane over the bottom edge of a sticking door. Most recent issue was a dishwasher and an oven that weren't working. We inspected said appliances. We left and swore all the way home because the electrician who had done the last inspection passed them and they'd not been working then. Bought new ones and installed them the next week. Which is how landlords should work. Unseen unless there's a problem. Go back and read it in an Australian accent. It's even more funny. Lol. I would have emailed both the agent and the landlord on the last day, saying that you left the house empty, the way it came, and that you considered staying longer, but the monthly inspections made us realize that we wanted to own and live in our own house.
Well done.
So this is different from what I have experienced as a renter in the US. Can you give me a rundown of the players? You and your wife equals the renters. LL who conducts the inspections, or was he just being nosy by looking over the fence? The inspectors, are they government employees? And the leasing agent, presumably to assist with renting out the property and manages the renewals? Do all renters in Southern Australia have to deal with inspectors coming into their rentals? All landlords are bastards. I live in the USA. I am appalled that you were inspected every few months. That would destroy my mental health. Geez. Even in US military housing they didn't do quarterly inspections of family quarters. They just had major nitpicky regulations that you had to meet when you moved out. We got dinged one time because there were hanger marks on the back wall of one of the closets and dust in the door tracks of the china cabinet. A very satisfying read. Thanks. Been in my house renting since losing my home in the mortgage crisis. Never once had an inspection. I think it's different here than the States, but haven't heard of it. We do ours every 6 months here in the UK. Good tenant though in this house, so we have a bit of give and take. We always give plenty of notice and don't fret the small stuff. It seems like the guy was pretty cool. Then you have his bitch of a wife. You wonder why married men are always miserable.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.